Pokémon has had thousands of products produced in their 25-year time span, but for all the products we see in the West, there are hundreds, if not thousands more exclusive to Japan. So in this video, we're going to be looking at 20 Pokémon products exclusive to Japan, and we're going to start with one of the weirder exclusive products that we never got access to in the West, and that is Pokémon trainer statues. We have gotten a lot of Pokémon statues in the West, but the Pokémon Company has also made countless collectible figures and plushies for iconic trainers from the games, anime, and manga. Some of the more noticeable products include this plush version of Alistair, this statue figure of Brendan from the Generation 3 games, and my personal favorite set of statues, the Tamaratomi Yummy Sweets figures including Pokémon like Mew, Gumi, and Drifloon. Drifloon, again, on a figure. Don't buy your kids ice cream in Japan, I guess. Up next, we have the world of Pokémon hair accessories, where we have the Pokémon hairbands, which have not as of yet been officially released in the West. Some of the Pokémon they use for these hairbands include Snorlax, Gengar, and Ditto. While on the topic of clothing, let's also throw in this set of drawstring bags that can't be that hard to produce for the States, featuring Pokémon like Raikou and Rayquaza. It's such a cool product that I wish we had over here in the West. Pokémon cards have become a huge part of the Pokémon TCG, and we're going to talk about some of the rare Pokémon cards in a bit, I promise. But for now, let's talk about the countless Pokémon sleeves that are exclusive to Japan. These card sleeves are pretty cheap to make, and I'd imagine the profit margin for these products is immensely high, so why not make them for the West? It's truly a shame, as some of these exclusive card sleeves are really awesome, and if there isn't a Pokemon you like in the Western release of card sleeves, just check these ones out, as I can guarantee it has been released in Japan. In recent episodes, we have spoken about Pokemon kitchenware, and this had us looking into some of the rarer products out there. While we were looking, we found a plethora of Japanese exclusive kitchenware, but to keep this video under 10 hours long, we have found one of these lines of kitchenware that I personally believe are some of the coolest designs I've ever seen. These are the Hanten Mamazara plates, which are exclusive to the East. And just look at how adorable they are, even incorporating Pokemon you would never expect, including Mienfoo, the one fighting type no one ever remembers. I understand this kitchenware is very niche and probably would not sell very well in the West, but right now I want the entire set. Before we move into the top 10, I found a product that does not make much sense to me, but I want to get your opinion on. The Bandai Kunut series of figures. They somewhat resemble football training dummies, but in a Pokemon fashion. From what I was able to gather, using my absolutely no knowledge of Japanese, there are about 7 series of this figure style ever released, but it has gone largely unheard of in the West. But what do you think? Are they weird or kinda cute? Next up, we have the Pokémon Mystery Dungeon games exclusive to Japan. The Wii was a massively popular console, and obviously around this time, the DS and Game Boys were still really popular. In the West, we got access to countless Pokémon Mystery Dungeon games, such as Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team, Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team, and Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time, but I bet you did not know that Japan had 3 exclusive titles that we never got to see in the West. These games include Mystery Dungeon Keep Going Blazing Adventure Squad, Mystery Dungeon Let's Go Stormy Adventure Squad, and Mystery Dungeon Go For It Light Adventure Squad. Why we never got these games in the West is a bit baffling. It certainly makes these games a bit more elusive. While we are on the topic of Pokemon games, let's talk about the Pokemon games for the Sega Pico. You heard me right, Pokemon games released on a Sega console. Well, the Sega Pico was one of the last consoles that Sega ever really made and was intended for much younger audiences. The cartridges used for this console were essentially books, similar to a lot of other consoles aimed at children. The Pokemon games we saw on this console included Pokemon Catch the Numbers, Pokemon Advanced Generations, I've Begun Hiragana and Katakana, Pokemon Advanced Generations, Pico for Everyone, Pokemon Loud Battle. While yes, we saw the Sega Pico outside of Japan, these games never really saw the light of day in the West and have such become massively sought out by collectors throughout the West. Moving away from games for a moment, let's just talk about a couple of the Pokemon cards that were never released in the West. Pokemon TCG has a pretty decent system for releasing cards in Japan, and then the West, it is very fluid and well designed. When you look at the most recent Paldea Evolved set, it is the combination of 3 Japanese sets, which include Snow Hazard, Clayburst, and Triple Beat. However, this has not always been the case. I found 3 TCG cards that we never saw released in the West. These cards are Pikachu, Jigglypuff, and Clefairy, Mischievous Pichu, and Great Rocket's Mewtwo. These 3 cards were never released in the West, largely because they came from different promotions that were ongoing in Japan. The Pikachu, Jigglypuff, Clefairy card was included in the July 1997 CoroCoro magazine as a jumbo promotional card, and tie in with the magical Pokemon Journeys manga, since these 3 Pokemon were befriended by the protagonist Hazel. The Mischievous Pichu card was released as a partnership product between the Pokemon Company, a fashion brand called Granif, and Hajime Sayasho, a Japanese content creator. The card did have some English version float through the internet a while ago, but the card was never officially released in the West. Great Rocket's Mewtwo was another interesting card because it was released alongside a sequel to the TCG game for the Game Boy, despite us never seeing that sequel. The game the card comes from was titled Pokemon Card GB2 Here Comes Team GR. We will likely never see an English release for these cards due to most of them being over 20 years old, but the value of these cards nowadays is extraordinary. Now on this channel, we love talking about plushies, and Pokemon plushies are now a main part of the Pokemon merchandising lines, but there are hundreds of plushies out there that have never been released in the West. Let's talk about some of my personal favorites. Poncho Pikachus are some of the most sought-after collectible plushies that you can get from Japan. These Pikachu plushies come in a unique outfit of a Mega Pokemon. These include Mega Rayquaza, Mega Charizard, and Mega Sableye, which is one of the rarer ones to find. Shiny Mega Gardevoir is a very weird Pokemon to create a plushie for, since it never had any lore relevance in the anime or the video games, at least in the same way as Steven's Metagross, but the plushie is still very cool. It's very difficult to list more of these since there are just so many of them, but if any of you have any Japanese exclusive Pokemon plushies, I'd love to see them, so join the Discord and share some of your weird exclusive plushies. While researching for this video, we looked everywhere to find some of the weirder products that are exclusive to Japan, and imagine my surprise when I found this Pikachu sponge. Firstly, this is a bizarrely niche product for the Pokemon Company to make, but the real question is, why have we not got a Western release of this? Pokemon centers in Japan are much more like department stores where you can get a lot more than just plushies or Pokemon cards. Not only can you get this adorable Pikachu sponge, you can also get things such as pillows, tableware, and clothing. It's truly an amazing place. If any Pokemon fans ever find their way to Japan, definitely go in and have a look. Let's talk about a brand I had never heard of, which I believe is called Moncole, or Monster Collection. These toys are created by Takara Tomy and are some of the most well-designed Pokemon toys I have ever seen. Just to list a few that I personally really like: Pawmi, Sprigatito, Eevee. Now the numbers on these photos do actually mean something, as they are as collectible as the TCG cards for people in Japan, due to them being incredibly cheap. And this of course leads to a large collector base for these toys, and you can actually get these toys in the West despite them being exclusive to Japan. So definitely have a look when you're done watching this video. We've spoken about video games, we've spoken about weird merch. Now let's talk about manga. Manga has slowly become bigger in the West. However, in Eastern countries, manga has been one of the main sources of entertainment for years, and Pokemon has been a key part of that since 1996, which is what largely popularized the series in the East. However, despite the growing popularity of manga in the West, there have been countless iterations of the manga that we never got to see an English release, such as the elusive aim to be a card master manga. Think if the Pokemon universe took more of a Yu-Gi-Oh approach, where cards are used to battle each other as opposed to the physical Pokemon, that's what this series was. Well, series is a bit of a stretch, since this manga only ever had 1 volume printed, meaning it definitely did not perform well, and that's why we never got to see it in the West. There have of course been other manga iterations of the Pokemon universe that were more popular that we never got to see, such as the Pokemon Pocket Monsters manga, which was wildly successful, but we never saw, likely due to some of the more racy humor which would be censored in all Pokemon media outside of Japan. Pokemon Go revived the Pokemon franchise for a lot of people who had not played the game since the 90s, but this was not Pokemon's first attempt at creating an app to coincide with their massively successful franchise. The Pokemon Company has made a fair few apps in the past for mobile phones, but let's go back to the first ever Pokemon app, which was called Pokemate. The game basically allowed you to catch Pokemon and send messages to people you were friends with in the game. Think Tamagotchi, but for Pokemon. That's basically what this game was. The problem this game faced, however, is that you were limited to 3 Pokemon at a time unless you were willing to pay a monthly subscription. Imagine Pokemon Go, but you had to pay to have more than 3 Pokemon. You'd think all Niantic cared about was money, which is crazy, right? Right? Pokemate was displayed at E3 in 2006 as they had an English release planned, however the game never made it outside of Japan. Next, let's talk about food, and I'm not talking about Slowpoke Tails or Cloth Stick, I'm talking about official Pokemon food licensed by the Pokemon Company. In Japan, candy is a very different style to that in the West, so countless different types of Pokemon candy have been released in Japan that we never saw in the West. Some of my personal favorites include Pokemon Corn Puff Snacks, Pokemon Xylitol Ramune Candy, Fuji Am I a Pokemon Donut Balls, Koala's March Pokemon Cookies, specifically the cheesecake mix, and the Lottie Pokepuni Pokemon Gummy. Candy in Japan is so much better than anywhere else in the world, and thankfully, nowadays, Due to easier access to these candies, you can get them in the States relatively easily, so definitely worth ordering. And finally, in at number 1, we have Pokémon household utilities. I'm talking about Pokémon toilet paper, Pokémon baby wipes, Pokémon diapers, and so much more. These products are massively exclusive to Japan since the companies in the West do not want to partner up with the Pokémon company despite them being one of the most successful franchises of all times. But, and I've said this before, I would feel pretty horrendous if I was using an electric rat every time I went to the bathroom.